Are we live?
I think so. Are we live?
Yeah, I think so.
It's so much harder trying to MC this thing from my cell phone rather than my studio at home. But here we are. Phoenix Suns have hired their new head coach in typical fashion, Matthew. Every time we have a podcast, the next morning is when the Suns news happens. It's happened once again. The Phoenix Suns are moving forward with new head coach Frank Vogel, which we kind of called last night on the pod, didn't we?
Yeah, and I think you actually called this one a few weeks ago, right? He was on the top of your list. We talked about him just briefly on that one pod where we went over like all the candidates. He's a guy that was a scapegoat in LA in a way, but I'm glad it's not Doc Rivers. I'm glad we didn't get that guy. It's fine. It's one of those where, right, you're just like, it's a new coach. It's a guy that kind of knows his shit, and we'll see how he fits with the roster. And I think it's an okay hire. I'm not too excited, but how do you feel, man?
Well, we talked about it last night on the pod, and we went down the Doc Rivers river, if you will, very briefly at the end of the pod, and we talked about KY Jelly, Kevin Young, and how that could be a possibility. And after we discussed kind of our feelings on both of them, how we wouldn't be excited for either of them, really, we both said, yeah, that means it's probably going to end up being Frank Vogel because he's the one we're not talking about.
Yeah.
When you take a look at the totality of what is available outside of Ty Lue, because Ty Lue was the golden goose. Ty Lue was the guy who we feel could come in and take over the reins and do so in a fashion that was satisfactory, at least by the fan base. Based on what was left, I think Vogel is actually the best guy. I really do. As you mentioned, somewhat a scapegoat in Los Angeles, somebody who is a defensively minded coach, which I think for me personally, and again, this is a personal preference, I've always liked defensively minded players and coaches. I just, defense wins championships and all that fun stuff. But that's where I kind of fall. And when I look at Frank Vogel, knowing that Ty Lue probably wasn't going to be available and we'd have to do some sort of transaction with the Clippers, we'd have to cut our legs out to spite ourselves as we enter this new CBA, and we're already going to be scrounging for pennies and trying to construct a roster, and you need every available dollar you can to get somebody. I'm not upset with this. We talked about it last night. No matter what happens, we're not going to be happy. I'm not happy, Matthew.
Yeah. It's something stable. You got to get into something that, just feels right. Last night I was a little insecure about where this team was headed. This doesn't really help that too much, but it does kind of just set like a base for this team to where it's like, okay, you got that coach, like you said, defensive minded, some guy that is respected, some guy that can handle the superstars. It's well known. You won the bubble championship. I mean, if that even counts, but it doesn't matter. I think this guy, he knows his stuff, and I think he will be respected with this team. When I first think about like how long is it going to take for this team to really gel and get together and work on things, maybe just it'll be like the first Sun season with Monty, right? In a way, it's not going to be one of those things where it's going to take some time. Give it a couple years. I think you have these guys going into the training camp, and you have your coach now, and it's some guy that will get things together quickly, and you can start building as soon as the season starts. And I'm kind of more positive about the outcome this year. I really am. I think it's not sexy, it's not exciting, but it's a good head coach. If you went Kevin Young, then there's the worry about, is he going to be, how long is it going to take him to get this team ready? How long is it going to take him
is
to
he learning on
really
the job,
improve?
right?
Yeah, you kind of just don't want to go that way. And I wanted to ask you too, like Frank Vogel, I mean, we talked about him barely, but was he even an option? Like, was he even interviewed? Did anybody know about him being interviewed for the Suns job? Was he even a candidate?
Well, yeah, we talked about last night. He was one of the three finalists that they mentioned. It was Doc Rivers, Frank Vogel, and Kevin Young.
Okay, my bad.
Finalists. When we first went through our coaching candidates, he wasn't on a lot of people's radar. I went through and I put together quite an extensive dossier of available candidates, and Frank Vogel was one of the last ones we mentioned because he didn't coach last year. He's not somebody who lost his job this past year. He's somebody who took a year off, did some self-assessment, and now finds himself in a position to once again be the head coach of two budding superstars in the NBA. He did that with LeBron. He did that with Anthony Davis. And yes, he won the Mickey championship over there in Orlando, but he still won that championship. And again, in true LeBron fashion, it was Frank Vogel who ultimately became the scapegoat when the team didn't produce due to numerous reasons, due to Anthony Davis's health, due to roster construction, due to Russell Westbrook joining the team, right? There was a lot of different things that the general manager in Rob Pelinka in Los Angeles didn't set that team up for success. And when they ultimately didn't win, it was Vogel whose neck was on the chopping line, as a lot of head coaches do. That's just the nature of the NBA. So I don't think that he was ousted from NBA. And I read that piece on our podcast when we did it, talking about how a reporter from the SB Nation site for the Los Angeles Lakers mentioned just that. Like, it kind of sucks that Vogel's going because he does have a lot of really good qualities that are transferable. It's just unfortunate that because this team wasn't constructed correctly, he's the one who had to pay the price for it.
Yeah, but that's how it is. And just like Nick Nurse, in a way where teams, players will get sick of a coach. It just happens. It's a fresh start for him. It is kind of nice that he had the year off. I mean, that's kind of cool. I mean, clear your mind and come back into things and adjust and just make sure, like, hey, like, I'm going to hit on all cylinders this time or try my best. Self-reflection is good. I think what this team is going forward, who knows? But, the defense does help. And you have guys on the team that are automatic offensive weapons. So I like the fact, and if you keep DA, and you get back to defense, maybe that's going to help him out too.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see now. This is the first domino to fall. Now, as we've talked about on previous pods and talked about the future programming that we're doing on the Suns Jam Session podcast, that we're going to be doing free agency look-ins at different positions. We're doing trade machine stuff. Like, how is this roster going to be constructed? Is it something that Frank Vogel is going to have some impact on? Is he going to sit there and say, listen, James Jones, we've got two of the best offensive players in the league. We need to focus on having the ability to shut people down. Because go back to what the biggest challenge was for the Suns in the playoffs this season. They just couldn't get stops. I mean, we had the offensive firepower. We just couldn't stop. Now, granted, one of those teams was the Denver Nuggets, and nobody apparently is stopping the Denver Nuggets because of their fluidity and chemistry on offense. But you have to have some defensive-minded players and people who have the capabilities to execute your defensive game plan. And again, with Frank Vogel being more of a defensively-minded coach, as we explore these different options in free agency and explore these different trade machine options, you would think that the Suns are going to start to target potentially some defensively minded players, right?
Yeah, I think so. Patrick Beverly, huh? Some guy. You want those tough dudes.
Dennis Schroeder.
You got to bring some of these guys in. And we're talking about the money too last night and how, there's not a whole lot there. And that's fine because I think a lot of these guys defensively, like you even said, Schroeder, I mean, there's guys that are cheap out there that you can get to surround this team, I think, with the offensive weapons you have. But for me, really, like, I know the whole Ayton thing. I've said I'm done, I'm moving on and all that. But if you get a guy in here that's, new to the organization that can maybe, I feel like we do that all the time. When KD was here, we were like, maybe he can help with DA. You know what I mean?
Everybody's got to help DA.
That's
right?
a thing, though. Yeah, if we can't get rid of him, I think this is big upside for him just defensively. Because if DA can just be that defensive guy he was 2 years ago, that's going to be big for this team. I don't really care what he does offensively, right? He can just get the scraps here or there if he wants, but this helps him in that way. And I think KD, you already know he's outstanding defensively if he's healthy. Booker's improved too. And then offensively, man, like, these guys can figure it out themselves, right? I mean, you're not going to have Chris Paul out there, but I think that Booker and KD know enough to really get this offense going next year. And if that's what we have to do is just rely on those two guys, I'm pretty happy with that. So, the more and more I'm talking about this now, I'm kind of a little bit excited. I'm glad it's just kind of done. I'm glad they actually just got somebody. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It was kind of frustrating that no one was actually, named head coach yet.
So Ted Lubin says in the chat, and I know it's been reported that KY is going to stick on as lead assistant. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, I think it's up to Vogel though, right? I don't think that's like a knock on KY, is it? I mean, he had the interview, didn't get it, and it's not like he's going to get another head coaching job anywhere. I think him staying here would be awesome. I mean, you wouldn't want to coach Kevin Durant, Booker. Like, you got to stay here. It's up to Frank Vogel, though, right?
Yeah, it's going to be his staff I'm sure that those conversations have already begun in part of the hiring process, and perhaps that's why it's been talked about on Twitter, and some of the national pundits have released the fact that Kevin Young is potentially will stick on as the lead assistant. But I'm with you, and I think that's the key thing. KY's probably interviewed other places. He's a finalist here. He didn't get it. He probably has a good relationship, obviously, with James Jones. And he's got Kevin Durant and Devin Booker to play around with for the next few years and to build his reputation on. Why would you not want that opportunity? Now, again, we'll see what Vogel does, but I think that that's obviously good for the Suns because it does have some continuity. You know, for those of you who are in the Kevin Young camp, and I know there's quite a few of you out there, I think that you have to be happy if he's staying on and you have Frank Vogel. I kind of feel like it's Hannah Montana, baby. It's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, no, it's nice. You know, the one thing too that came out before this happened, I think it was right before that, Doc Rivers pulled his name out, right? And I think a lot of people were happy about that.
Yes.
I don't know if that's something to do with us. You know, is it me or is it just him or what? But I think the thing is with Doc, when he's in the situation of, hey, I interviewed, I'm Doc Rivers, give me the job. And you know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, I should just get the job, right? Maybe that's how he thinks. You know, he thinks he should deserve what he's not going to get this offseason, maybe. But when I saw that, I was like kind of worried about that. But I'm like, why do I care, dude? I didn't want Doc. Like, why would I want Doc to be even close to the conversation of him being our head coach? I don't want that.
That's the other side of this conversation. You know, for those of you who are watching, again, thank you. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button down below. If you're listening, I will edit out the beginning part where it was me and Matthew staring at each other for 10 seconds. Like,
we live?
Are we live, man? You won't hear you won't hear what you saw on YouTube. But I'm very excited that the graphic that Matthew's created for this podcast doesn't say Doc Rivers on it. That's the other side of this today. Is when I saw it, and it always comes through when you like. I literally just started a meeting, right? We have a morning stand up at work. I'm now out in my truck in the parking lot. Thankfully, it's like nice and spacious back here.
I was gonna say, dude. It's like one of those rap videos you got going on with the back seat with champagne and some girls back there.
Frank Vogel. But the other side of this is when that notification comes up, it's like, sweet, it ain't Doc Rivers, and I'm okay with that. Doc Rivers is literally would bring the same issues that we've had with Monty Williams, where when the playoffs come, the adjustments go out the window. Frank Vogel, again, you know, you have access to Basketball Reference, right?
I do, yeah. Well, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I might go off camera as I
have him on already. What's up?
All right. So talk about his playoff career. What's his playoff record?
All right. So
go
playoff
year by year.
Year by year. Okay. So first year, even with Indiana, he was 1-4.
Okay. So
1-4.
First round.
Yeah, first round. Second year, he was 6-5, so second round. Next year, 11-8.
And that is with Indiana still?
Indiana, yeah. And then he had one more stint, or two more stints with Indiana. His fourth year, it was 10-9. And then his last year before going to Orlando, he was 3-4.
So with those Indiana teams, those were the Paul George years, right? With those Indiana teams, he had some success. Now, granted, he was going up against the Eastern Conference that was weak, but had LeBron James in it. That had him with the Cavaliers, that had him with the Miami Heat. So, you know, that's kind of like talking about the Suns in the mid-'90s and the Sonics in the mid-'90s. And, you know, that's on the Western Conference side. You talk about Mark Price and the Cavaliers in the late 80s and Clyde, or I'm trying to think of the Knicks in the 90s. Like, some teams just ran into the buzzsaw that was Michael Jordan. Vogel's.
Oh, John, you're out, buddy. I think what he's going to say, too, is Vogel's teams, you know, they were stopped. And the whole Paul George thing, when Paul George was a Phoenix Sun, you coming back?
Yeah, I'm back. Somebody called me.
All right, what's up?
They're probably asking, like, where are you? I'm like, I'm in the parking lot.
Yeah, I'm in my car, hotboxing. What were you saying about Paul George? Are you blacked out again? Yeah, so I don't know. I think he's going to say that Paul George basically, you know, with the injury and stuff that he had with the Pacers, that team was actually championship contenders those years for sure. Is that what you're going to say? Did you hear what I said?
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah,
now he's going to have more opportunity, obviously, with the Phoenix Suns and with the talent on this team. And again, we have such a long journey to go, because this team and their roster has such a long journey to go. But I think that this is a good foundational step for the Phoenix Suns. I really do. I know that Coach Evan B of the He's on Fires podcast is like losing his shit on Twitter because he's not a fan apparently of Frank Vogel or anything that happens in this world. He's always mad. How excited are you that the Phoenix Suns now have a head coach that looks just like Joe
Yeah.
from Impractical Jokers?
Yeah, I love it. I love how it's making the rounds too on Twitter. Like everyone notices that because he absolutely does. That's the thing with him. Like the name Frank Vogel just doesn't sound that great. I mean, it's okay. Maybe because he played with LeBron and LeBron makes anybody look like a fool. Even Ty Lue, he made him look like a fool. And then yeah, just the look on his face and stuff. Same thing with Ty Lue. You remember like when he was with the Cavs, Ty Lue was the same thing. LeBron was just like always like running into him on the bench and shit like that. So I think that rubs off, and that's a Capricorn thing. It's an insecurity thing, and he judges people too much, and he makes people look bad, man. But yeah, in a Suns uniform, Frank Vogel will look pretty good though, right? In the Suns uni in a polo.
In a Suns uniform, yeah.
Yeah.
When he puts on his jersey and he's out there.
When he runs out on the court through the smoke.
Yeah, he runs out on the court and he's getting high fives to everybody. No. Frank Vogel. You know, again, a long road ahead for Phoenix. But again, I think that this is the right move. I think that given the options that were out there, Ty Lue off the table because you'd have to give up some compensation. Doc Rivers, no. Mike Budenholzer, no. Monty Williams, no. Kevin Young was kind of, and this is the sneaky pick, and I think it's the right one. And it's going to be interesting to see over the next few hours and days what the reaction of the fan base is. It's already somewhat divided. But again, I like the fact that they're going with the guy, to your point earlier, who isn't going to be learning on the job. As much as Kevin Young carries that weight that people talk about of, you know, Devin Booker likes him. He's an X and O's guy. Good, bad, or indifferent. He'd have to learn on the job. There's going to be some mistakes during the season when it comes to timeouts or roster management or things of that nature that we've now avoided by bringing in Frank Vogel. So as Carlos Miramon says in the chat, it is the right choice.
Yeah, you can see all the Jamsters in there. They're definitely coming to terms with, you know, this is the best thing out there that we got other than Ty Lue, which was not going to be available. I think everyone kind of realizes that.
Yeah, now, again, it's going to be interesting to see how the roster construction, how we navigate the free agency and the trade market in, you know, starting in July. So plenty more to come on the Suns Jam Session podcast. Make sure you're setting those notifications on YouTube to let you know when you go live, because you never know when we're going to go live. It might happen where I'm hanging out in a parking lot and in the back of my truck while people are calling me, and there's like, "Where's Voida?" Like, he just disappeared all of a sudden, you know. And that was my chef calling me. He probably saw a notification on his phone because he does subscribe, and he probably saw, hold on, John's on YouTube right now. I'm gonna give him some
that's why
shit.
I don't tell people at work, because I'm like, I don't want.
Yeah, they can't help it.
Things like this.
Somebody gets into a Suns conversation, I just can't help myself. But make sure you subscribe, make sure you rate, make sure you review. If you're a Caesars Sportsbook newbie and you're living in the state of Arizona, go ahead and join and use the promo code SunsJamFull, and you'll get a bunch of stuff. They'll match you up to $1,250 on your first bet if you use our promo code. So we appreciate that. But yeah, Matthew, I think that's all we got for this one. So we'll be coming live on Monday to talk about trading CP3 now.
Yeah. We'll keep it rolling, man. We'll keep it rolling. So go home and love your family. I think,
I'm gonna go back to
Is that
work.
what I'm throwing out there?
Yeah, you go home and love your family. I'm gonna go back to work. Okay.
Go home and work. Yeah, go home and work.